This is Monocle on Fashion, a show on Monocle Radio offering global perspectives and nuanced conversation on the worlds of fashion and style. I'm Natalie Theodosi, your host and Monocle's fashion director. Over the Christmas break, we wanted to take a moment to look back at the year in fashion, take stock, and revisit some of the conversations that really left a mark. This week, we share some highlights from the many designers we heard from in 2025. From the London icon who spoke to us about the power of buying back your brand and running it on your own terms.
You know, in some ways we could bring all those people from Singapore and LA and all the places we had stores, in a way bring them to us. So when they passed through London, there was a reason to visit and there was some engagement and some story and some hospitality in a way.
To the costume designer who opened the doors to her hotel suite in the Cannes Film Festival to talk about her journey to Hollywood and designing for the screen versus real life.
I think the alchemy of all the different pieces just came together and it really feels logical.
Plus, the independent brand owner who gave us some very valuable tips on how to stay inspired and creative during a time of information overload.
Inspiration kind of can come from the most surprising places.
This and more on Monocle on Fashion. To help me with this year in review, I'm joined by Monocle on Fashion producer, Lily Austin. Lily, welcome back. I'm glad you're here with me this time.
Thank you, me too. It's nice to be here to kind of look back over some of our highlights.
Yeah, I think it is important before the year ends to take stock and remember everything that we've done. And I think we should start with Anya Hindmarch, because we both agreed that was such a fun interview, right? And visiting her at her shop made such a difference.
I loved it. She was so wonderful, and it was so brilliant to be in her space and to have her talk about the idea, the concept behind the village hall, which is kind of the centre of the Anya Hindmarch village, which has lots of different shops all in one little area of West London. And yeah, I found her so kind of riveting to listen to, but it was lovely to have her looking around and picking things out and explaining what makes up that shop.
And she seems like now that she has full ownership of her brand, she's really doing things her way and she's having fun. I mean, in September when we were there, she transformed this space into a tuck shop theme, and you had everything from leather pencil cases to candy to anything you can imagine in that space.
Yeah, even shopping bags. I mean, I think there were caps with slogans from school on. She'd really thought through everything there. I mean, even the shop assistant was dressed like a dinner lady. So it really brought me back to my own school memories. I remember talking to you about it afterwards, Natalie, being like, yes, this is exactly what a British school is like.
Yeah. And it's an important lesson, I think, because we've spoken to a lot of creatives, but these are people who are also running businesses, that it's important to have to use humor and have fun, but also not to follow the industry pace and the usual rules, because that can actually end you up in quite a bad place. And she said that she almost lost control of the business and things weren't going well. But now she's doing something different and she's doing it on her own terms. So let's hear from Anya Hindmarch.
And I think sometimes designer stores can feel quite snobby, and it can feel a bit mean. It can be like the mean girl in the class.
You're scared to almost kind of go in.
And they look you up and down. And I sort of feel like, actually, these are our customers. Like, if we don't act in a way like hospitality, where we engage them in our world, share with them some quite serious things that we do. We're passionate about how we make things and being, behaving in a responsible way with so many touch points of what we do. But actually, if you don't make people feel welcome, what are we doing? It's mad. So we like to be very open, and I mean, we take families quite seriously. So we love to engage the kids, but we play with the mums on different things. And that's a nice. I feel like it's a kind way to behave, to give parents something fun for their children to do whilst they can shop. Or we do a huge project for Christmas in the village, which you might know with this. I mean, it's mad, but we have thousands and thousands of children coming through our grotto. You just have these lovely memories with families, and I think families thank you for that. I think it's a generous thing to do. So that is sort of who we are. We can't be anyone else. And much as sometimes it feels perhaps a different take on luxury fashion, it works for us, and our customers respond to it, and we're having fun. So we're just going to carry on very much from gut,
Yeah.
That's how we roll.
Yeah, and I'm curious, did it take you a lot of trial and error to find this formula that clearly you're happy with, it's what you stand for, and it works business-wise as well?
It's busy. So in fashion, as you know, the timetable is you're working on collections probably about a year in advance. And I mean, the idea of the Village Hall and the Village came about really when we bought the business back, which we did in 2019. I wanted to reorganize the business because we had about 65 stores, probably at our sort of most around the world, everywhere from Singapore to LA to, all around the world. And I felt in some ways that the idea of the cookie cutter store, the same store, which is what we planned to do. We had a sort of rollout Bible, and we had the same architects, and it was totally the same windows around the world. It was just totally sort of, uniform and in a way cookie cutter. And in some ways I just felt that wasn't modern anymore. I kept going back to this phrase, which was, if retail is to exist in a digital world, there needs to be a reason to visit. Because you can access a brand digitally from all around the world. So therefore, the retail experience, I think, has to be really special. So I sort of had this sense of, I think, partly buying the business back and wanting to mend what was quite a broken business when we bought it back. I wanted to come back to where I had my first store, which I opened next door here in the Village when I was sort of 20-something. And I wanted to create this space, which is sort of 2 streets away from where I live and close to our headquarters, and therefore true to us, authentic to us as a location, and to create something that was, in some ways we could bring all those people from Singapore and LA and, Malaysia and Hong Kong and all the places we had stores, in a way bring them to us. So when they pass through London, which they often do, there was a reason to visit, and there was some engagement and some story and some hospitality in a way. So it was sort of a feeling in my stomach, first of all, and then it sort of became a more serious idea, and I had this idea of creating a little village, which felt a bit sort of mad in a way, but, this idea of 6 stores and a cafe, and with at the centre of it, this what we call the Village Hall, this store that changes the whole time. And it responds to things I care about. So we've had everything from, my favourite shop in Tokyo, the stationery store, to we've had a fruit and veg shop, but we did it in a really creative way. We had it's almost treating fruit like it was gifting. So you might buy a peach, but it was a little pair of knickers, in a little box. And it was sort of, it was 2 little cherries with little eyes on, like little sort of, you might give to a boyfriend, or, it's just sort of fun ideas. So it's sort of a place where we can experiment. And I think it also was in response to the fact that we used to do very big and very creative shows in Fashion Week, which I loved doing because creatively it was, we wrote the music. I mean, every ounce of my being was in those shows. I absolutely lived for them, and it was so lovely to have that creative outlet to come up with a collection and then to sort of put it into a complete 360 world of, the inspiration and the touch points of the music and the lighting and everything. And I loved doing it, but it felt in a way quite wasteful. It was 9 minutes, hundreds of thousands of pounds, the whole set, we tried to recycle everything, but honestly a lot of it got scrapped, and it felt also quite exclusive. It was for an audience that was by invitation only. It was a fashion industry, and I felt so many people wanted to experience those amazing creative things that the fashion world does. So we decided to switch from doing fashion shows to doing this concept, which is always open to anyone, lasts longer than 9 minutes, and I think is a way of us welcoming our customers in and creating relationships with our customers and memories. So that was really the starting point.
That was Anya Hindmarch, designer and CEO of her eponymous brand, Anya Hindmarch. If you are in the city this Christmas, I'd recommend visiting Anya's Village Hall in southwest London. She has transformed it into Santa's grotto, complete with festive treats, Christmas tree decorations that are Anya's trademark brand of kitsch, plus Santa himself will be in attendance. But now we should go back to Paris, which we've been doing quite a while with Monocle's Paris Cafe having opened this year. One of my favorite trips was in July as everyone was preparing the big September collections. And I went there to speak to Peter Copping, who has taken over Lanvin, and it was amazing to see him really quite settled in. It's been a year since he took the job. He moved over from Balenciaga, and the team seemed really happy. He was so excited to discover Jean Lanvin's archives and really rework them. But I wonder, why do you think he has quite quickly become successful and regenerated in the interest in Lanvin after it was dormant pretty much for quite a while?
I mean, the sense I get from that interview, and it was a really lovely interview to listen back to because he does seem very excited. It's very much a conversation between the two of you talking about what inspires him. And that comes through is that for him, it was so much about Jean Lanvin and the archive. You know, he talks a lot about kind of going back and looking back at the things that make up the kind of codes of the house. And I think probably his lack of ego and his total focus on the brand and what makes the brand, but then bringing it into the present, I think is probably a really key to his success.
Should we make that the theme of the year, the lack of ego? Because it keeps coming up on every interview now. Every designer that we speak to, every good designer, I think, that we like and bring onto this show speaks about that or the idea of design as service instead of just focusing on your own vision. I think that's really fascinating. I never expected that would be the running theme of the year.
Yeah, but I suppose, there is a sort of stereotype about fashion people and brands. And I mean, you do need a bit of ego, I'm sure, to succeed in business.
And the stereotype is true to a certain extent. We have to admit that.
Yes. But I think longevity means that you need to be a bit kind of more open to other ideas and what works for the brand and less, of the self.
Yeah. And having seen Peter's last two collections for Lanvin, I think people are already starting to wear it now that the collections have made it onto the shop floors. I think he's really one to watch, and in 2026 the brand will even become even bigger. So let's hear from Peter Copping.
For me, it was really going back to the roots of the house. So really looking pretty much solely at the Jean Lanvin period. Mm-hmm. I think also the incredible thing is that it seems very relevant today. Just looking, the more I thought I knew a lot about it, but I think quite often with books, they always feature the same pieces. So you see a lot of the same things, but then just discovering the archive and the house and everything that it had, there was more and more to see. And we have our own great archive because Jean Lanvin was wanting to open a museum herself at one period. So I think that's why she archived things so thoroughly. But then Galliera has a beautiful collection, and they were very generous in letting me visit with the team and look at as many pieces I wanted to from their collection. They particularly had quite a lot of pieces from the 30s.
Amazing.
So that was probably the period that I was most drawn to, because I think it felt, as I said, very relevant today.
It's interesting because I was speaking with a costume designer, Catherine Martin, who was also saying the same, that she's been looking for inspiration and looking at the late 20s, the 30s, and drawing parallels to...
Yes. I mean, in our own collection, we have a lot of 20s pieces, so the decoration is really beautiful on them. But I find just the straight up and down silhouette, well, it feels very much of that period somehow. Mm-hmm. So I think just like the 30s silhouettes, which just have an ease and a comfort, makes it very right for today. It wasn't like Dior in the 50s with a corset inside or anything like that. So their clothes, I think, which are probably very wearer friendly in a way. But I think that's something that appeals to me about it.
Was there anything that surprised you that you found? Because you said, like you were saying, in public, they keep repeating the same pieces, but I'm sure there's like a wealth of other designs as well.
Well, the other thing, I really wanted to look at a lot of things, but I didn't want to get over academic about it, because I thought if I got too clever about it, I'd have just ended up in a hole, So I just kind of cherry-picked from things that I saw. I wanted to change it all up, in some way to just make it feel of today. So I'd say maybe some of the more iconic pieces became T-shirts, embroidered T-shirts for men. So I just thought that gave it a good twist. And then a lot of her things, the embellishment was quite often on the sleeve. So it's like, yeah, I like that idea. I'm going to do something with. And then also contrasting the fabrics a lot, so that then one of the ones that was a worked sleeve went on a black velvet sort of column dress. I think there's definitely parallels between us.
Yeah.
And like when I go along to her office, you see all these textiles that she bought from her travels, and it's like so exciting to see. And definitely the sort of things that stimulate me are some of the sources that she probably used as well.
And tell me, how is it? I mean, now you've had a very successful first debut.
Yeah.
How is it? Is there going to be continuity, or how is it evolving as you prepare?
Yeah, I'd say complete continuity, because I don't, people say, well, what are you going to do next for the next collection? It's kind of like, well, I'm going to do the same thing, because there's so much to draw upon and look at. And, and I think that's still very, very exciting. Even just alone, this is going to be a summer collection, so that opens up something else. And there's so many facets and aspects of her work that can be interesting to draw upon.
That was Peter Copping, creative director of Lanvin. Another big highlight, I think, for both of us, Lily, was having Nick Wakeman, founder of Studio Nicholson, come here in the studio in London. And it was around her brand's 15th anniversary. So we spoke about the founding story of Studio Nicholson, but also about how grounded she is. She takes inspiration from real people. I mean, Japan is another big influence in her life, in her work. And I just loved how true to herself she is and to her vision. She doesn't care about what other people are doing, what the trends are. And she really, I felt like she just stands her ground. Such a power woman. What did you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a great interview to listen to if you are wanting to start your own business, because I think the steps she took to started off, the research she did, and really thinking about what is needed, building these kind of staple pieces. She has a lot of good advice.
Let's hear from Nick Wakeman.
I actually did about a year and a half of research before I started the brand. I spoke to lots of people in the industry, what they felt that was missing. And then I spent quite a lot of time visiting factories and fabric mills in Italy to work out who were going to be my allies when I started the brand. And, we're still working with them today. Still the same factories, some of them. A lot of the same mills. We do a lot of fabric development with those mills. And I guess the founding principles were, let's make a garment that doesn't cost the earth but will last you a lifetime. And that's really what we're still doing. We don't talk about sustainability in a massive way. I don't really think it should be spoken about. I think it should be the norm. But I have some pieces in my wardrobe that are from the first collection. I love them. I've also got garments that are probably 20 or 25 years old. They're still my favourite pieces. I look after them, which I think is extremely important. But they're really well-made garments, so they last. And I think that's probably the biggest founding principle of the brand, is that these garments are made to last. And they're timeless in a way that they're not shouty, they're not screamy. They're just really nice clothes. And really nice clothes don't really change, like a really great house doesn't change, or a really great car will. They're sort of classics, and we're trying to modernise the classics in a way. So we're still doing that 15 years later.
And it's interesting that when you look back, you were thinking about day-to-day needs. You were thinking of yourself as the customer. And being on the road the last few weeks, especially around the menswear shows, a conversation that kept coming up was that fashion design, we need to look at it a lot more as a service job rather than creative directors designing kind of to indulge their own egos, their own fantasies. And it sounds like this is the approach that you've always kind of taken on. Is that something that you agree with?
I think you have to know who your customer is, and you have to listen to what people really want. I mean, I'm fascinated by people. People, for me, are everything in lots of different ways, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But it's not really about me. It's about who I stand for as a group of women or a group of men who are looking for something in particular. And it's kind of funny because I think 15 years ago it was sort of a bit of a secret. There was a secret tribe of people that wanted these garments made in a certain way, and that's what they were looking for, to have some satisfaction with the clothing that they wore. And I think that year and a half of research really set me up very well. I mean, God, I would love to have like 18 months to think about something now, but that doesn't happen. But yeah, I don't think it should be about, it's not about me. I don't do huge amounts of press. I don't talk about myself and lots of, sort of personal things. It's more about the clothes, and the clothes should do the talking rather than me. It's a company. There's so many people that make up the business who do great jobs. So yeah, it's an interesting point, Natalie. Yeah.
And it's refreshing to hear kind of how you view it. I guess that focus on the clothes also ties to your focus on fabric, your studies, and then all that research that you've done right from the beginning. So tell me a little bit about that. What has become like the signature fabrics, the mills that you always rely on?
I'm not going to tell you my mills.
No, you don't need to tell us exactly the secret. Maybe more kind of a general
signature
overview.
Fabric. So when I'm looking for fabric, I'm looking for how does it make you feel, or how would it feel against your skin. So potentially, for me, I want to feel really confident with the clothes that I wear. So if I've got something that's doesn't move with me and makes me feel stiff, I'm going to discount it. There's lots of different elements that I look for when I'm selecting fabrics, but there are certain qualities that we've been running for around 12 years, and one of them I developed with a really nice mill in Italy, and it's a powder twill, but it's a double cotton, and that we make a lot of trousers in, and I specifically developed it for a particular trouser, which was the women's wear continuity pant, which is called Dordoni, and then later on came the menswear version of it. We make a chino in it. I mean, it's just a fantastic fabric that does so much. It holds its shape. It's got a certain snap to it when you move. So, there's things like that remain. And I guess, there's lots of kind of elements that stands out to me when I'm selecting fabric. So is it spongy? Is it shiny? Is it soft? Does it move really well? Is it rounded so it holds its shape without being stiff and making you feel uncomfortable? And I think that the way that clothes feel on you is the most important thing, because if you feel great, you also look great because you're confident and you feel authentic to yourself.
That was Nick Wakeman, the creative director and founder of Studio Nicholson. So next up, we have a costume designer who collaborated with Miu Miu last year on a collection. This is Catherine Martin. You may not know her name, but you'll probably be familiar with her work, as she is the life and professional partner of Baz Luhrmann and has collaborated with him on films such as Moulin Rouge, The Great Gatsby. So it was incredible to get her on the show. Natalie, you interviewed her in Cannes, right?
She is incredible. I recognize her work, although she worked on so many incredible films, but I didn't know as much about her, to be completely honest. And I went to interview her in Cannes during the film festival in her incredible suite in the Hotel Martinez, but I didn't quite know what to expect. She's not usually the one being interviewed, but the door opens, there's this smiley, amazing woman in her striped top. She's quite loud. She was just so optimistic, such infectious energy. And I mean, we were there to talk about the capsule collection she designed for Miu Miu, and she also directed a short film, which was something so new to her. But aside from that and her work, I love that she also spoke about feeling insecure to put herself in the spotlight, to direct a film, to design clothes for real people versus just do her work on the screen, but how she's pushing herself to demand more and to take on new challenges. So there's kind of a lot of universal lessons, I think. And it just amazed me that even such an incredible, successful woman has insecurities like all of us.
I know. I found it very kind of inspiring and sort of reassuring interview to listen to hear about her be so open and honest about these things, about her feelings throughout this, and then but her be so successful and yet still be pushing even at this like amazing point in her career. And it was really fascinating to hear about how collection kind of then evolved into having this film element just because of her process for developing the clothes. It was a real testament to what kind of opportunities and new adventures can open up if you kind of just put yourself fully into the project you're working on. So let's hear from Catherine Martin.
The film was something that came later.
Yeah.
So the very first thing was that Mucha and the Miu Miu design team wanted to approach the upcycle project in a different way. So they didn't want it just to be, like usually it's, we found beautiful kilts, we're going to upcycle them, or beautiful leather jackets, we're going to upcycle them. They wanted to be much more story-based. And so they wanted me to think of a kind of a world, a visual world, in which there could be characters that they could costume for upcycle. Mm-hmm. And so I proposed a number of, I think Caroline, who's the head of product, called them imaginariums, which I absolutely love that word. And then one was picked, which was this story that you see in the movie. And in order to flesh out who the characters were, to get costumes that would eventually become SKUs for the collection, I had to keep working on the story. So the first presentation to Miu Miu was like a visual diary. I wrote the little trip to the south of France as if it was from the writer's perspective as their daily diary. And then it was illustrated with collages, images from the period, Photoshop, little written artifacts, all put together in a deck. But then, as we had to start teasing out, well, who are the characters in this story? What are they like? Who are they? So that we knew what we were going to do in terms of the outfits. The story just kept evolving and the script kept getting longer because, in my mind, the only way I knew how to work out who these characters were was by doing that. And out of the deck, we found that there were recurrent themes like marinière, like striped T-shirting and lingerie and rowing blazers and men's evening wear, beach pyjamas and foulard tops. Like there's a very famous Molineux image of a woman in a foulard top. And as the script just kept getting evolved and we had to keep costuming all our characters, I think both the design team and Mucha thought, hey, we've got a script, why don't we make a little movie? And then those clothes were taken by Lotta. She became kind of, inverted commas, the costume designer, and I was the director, and I had to kind of say, these are the groups I think fit each of the different scenes from the collection. So it was an interesting process, I think, both for Lotta and me, because I am very detail-orientated. So I like to know, you know, on the 5th of March, this person will be wearing this with these socks, these shoes, that bra, that pair of Spanx, whatever. And I think this was just a much more fluid process because we didn't get the clothes. we were rushing to get the clothes, to get to the set, and then the idea of it being about a character and what they wore. But I think, however slightly chaotic it was at the end, I think the alchemy of all the different pieces just came together, and it really feels logical.
Yeah. It's interesting because you made the film almost without even knowing that you were making it.
Yes.
And tell me about because the story is so compelling, and I love that you chose the 1920s and 30s and what you said about that it's sort of this in-between period where there was a lot of contrast, a lot of experimentation. What is the appeal for you in that decade?
I think that it's a really interesting period for women.
Yeah.
And by that period, kind of most of the inventions that we know today, apart from these magical boxes, the cell phone and the internet, were kind of invented. So we were in a kind of modern period, even computers were invented. Sure, they're not what we know as computers today, but they're computers. And we were in a period of a lot of social freedom where you have women really starting to express themselves in so many areas of life, but at the same time there's kind of dark political forces on the horizon and a desire for the return to, in inverted commas, more traditional values. And I think that we find ourselves in a very similar period. I'm no politician, I'm not a social historian. I suppose I'm a woman who never thought I would live through many things I've lived through, whether it's COVID or, the current political kind of climate. Like, every day is a surprise. And I think that for people in the 20s and 30s, it was a very similar kind of time. And I think it's important because sometimes discomfort and changing time and tension can be really, I think, culturally and socially positive. It can push change for the better. And so I think you have to maintain an optimism and a joy, regardless of how bleak things may appear. So yes, I think it's about that dynamic. I'm getting very deep now, but I think it's about the dynamic between, on the one hand, you have to be really conscious of what's going on in the world, and at the same time, you have to keep a sense of levity and joy and hopefulness, because that's our, what are we giving our children? What are we giving, Miu Miu is a youthful brand. What are we giving them if all we give is, we've already handed them something not too great? Yeah. I think we need to be focusing on some positivity as well.
Yeah. That was costume designer Catherine Martin. So to finish, I really wanted to end with this final question that you threw to the team at Erdem during a recent interview, because I thought it was a very inspiring answer, and I think will kind of set up our listeners for the new year.
I think it's a perfect note to end. You're right. And it's only a few weeks ago I went to visit Erdem Moralioglu, the designer, and his partner Philip Joseph, who's an architect, and worked with him on the store. So we spoke about everything design, how they built the business and opened a new store. But at the end, I also asked him how he stays inspired, because they're doing so many different things and they've built this amazing business over 20 years. And it had to do with leaving your phone on the side and sketching and doing things with your hand away from screens in the computer. So I'm really going to try and employ it in the new year as far as I can. And I think it's something we all should do.
So let's hear it from Erdem Moralioglu and Philip Joseph.
Every week I try. I don't always succeed, but I go to London Library every Tuesday and I sketch. I lock my phone away in a locker. I work with the librarian there on research, and I dedicate a day to just either draw or try to figure out where we're going to go next. Some days are good days and it all comes to you. Some are not good and nothing comes to you, but at least you're surrounded by all of this inspiration. And I love working with a librarian, and that I find kind of really amazing and slightly outside of the box. So I really try to dedicate time to think about something that's nothing to do with other aspects of what you have to do during the week, but rather just focusing on the idea of where we're going to go next in terms of who she is and what ideas are we going to explore.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think anyone listening should take note. So inspiring. What about you, Philip?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we, in terms of our exchange, we love to kind of see things together, right? So we kind of love to travel and kind of see things together. And I feel that I'm just constantly looking and taking pictures. And so it's just a constant, notebook of references, details, materials,
It's interesting, even, places like Genoa, but also even, spending time in Seoul. And also one thing to say is, Philip, also, we opened a store and a shop-in-shop space in Seoul as well, and taking the environment that was developed in South Audley Street and bringing that to a different country that is very different. And it was also a really interesting exercise. But to say that we often find ourselves just with our eyes open, looking at things we've never seen before, and inspiration kind of can come from the most surprising places.
But it's good to put yourself in those places. I think that's the thing. I mean, it's sort of had this tradition of kind of going to a different city after each show. In fact, we need to revive the tradition. But
it's a great tradition.
Yeah,
neither of us have been to.
Yeah,
nice.
And so there was always a weekend after the show that's sort of quiet, and so we would take ourselves off to a different city each time, and that sort of thing is just really food for what we do. I think.
Power of the unfamiliar, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was Erdem Moralioglu and Philip Joseph. And that's it for today's show. We'll be back on the other side of Christmas with the best of this year's fashion weeks. Today's episode was produced and edited by Lily Austin. I'm Natalie Theodosi. Thank you so much for listening.